There were a few cute and innocent stories that my mom told me about her early childhood memories. She talked about when she was a little girl, her grandmother would sneak and eat handfuls of sugar cubes, which she wasn't allowed to do because she was diabetic. And my mom would sneak and grab handfuls of butter and hide under the table and just pig out on butter. She talked about when she was a little girl, her mom owned a cafe in downtown Oklahoma City, and a lot of famous people would come in whenever they were in town to perform a show. My mom said she would sit at the counter on her stool and spin around as fast as she could while everyone was sitting around eating and having a good old self time. Unfortunately, most of the stories she told me were not that cute and innocent, and it's time for me to let them all go. No longer will I carry my mom's pain. Part 1, the beginning. The first dark memory that she ever told me was of her when she was 5 years old and she was living with one of her eldest brothers in Wichita, Kansas, his wife, and her two teenage sons. Uncle Oscar took my mom, my Aunt Teresa, and my Aunt Kay because he was doing fairly well in Kansas, and taking them for the school year would help my grandmother out a great deal. To give a little context, my grandmother was 42 years old when she had my mom and my mom's twin Ted, who was numbers 12 and 13 of my grandmother's children. My mom's twin Ted didn't make it, so she ended up with 12 living children. There were 6 boys and 6 girls, and my mom was the baby of the bunch. My grandmother and her older children were having children at the same time, so she was also trying to help her oldest daughters raise all of their children. So again, this was supposed to be a big help to my grandmother, and it also was supposed to show my mom and her sisters a different side of life, not the same old struggle life they were used to. My mom talked about how on the outside everything looked amazing, but inside was anything but that. They had a nice home, nice clothes and shoes, plenty to eat, even though my uncle's wife couldn't cook to save her life. They even went to the beauty salon to get their hair done every week. But all of those niceties came at a price. My mom told me that her 19-year-old step nephew would do things like get high with his friends and then chase the girls around and try to beat them up. He would take my mom at 5 years old to the cemetery at night and make her sit in his lap and drive around the cemetery. And if she dared to mess up driving, he would pop her upside her head as hard as he could. He basically did anything he could to torture those 3 girls. My mom told me that because she was in kindergarten, she couldn't eat lunch at school. So every day she would have to walk home alone to eat lunch that was prepared for her. She said that one day she entered the house as she had done many times before. This man was standing behind the front door, and as soon as she closed it, he jumped out and grabbed her from behind. He tried to force his 19-year-old peen into her 5-year-old vag. And to make this violation a little easier for him, he decided to grab the one thing that my mom used to enjoy almost more than candy itself: butter. Thankfully, the butter didn't work, so he was not able to, well, he was not able to complete the task. My mom told my Aunt Kay what had happened, and my Aunt Kay, who was only about 5 years older than my mom at the time, not only did she write their mom a letter telling her what happened, Aunt Kay started giving her lunch money to my mom so that she didn't have to go back home alone anymore. Was that not a beautiful thing, though, for a 10-year-old to do? Like, to have the mind to do beautiful thing that Aunt Kay did. My aunt ended up trying to protect my mom from then on out. Unfortunately for her, one of those times cost her more than she ever would have thought. I believe it was sometime around the late 60s or early 70s. Aunt Kay was standing up for my mom once again during one of her and my dad's fights. My dad said that Aunt Kay and the family backed him into a corner in the bathroom of the club, and in self-defense, he charged at them with a broken bottle, stuck her in her eye, and from then on out, she had to remove her glass eyeball in order to clean it. Sad. As you can imagine, my mom felt so freaking guilty about that. Another thing, someone had to clean up a mess for her. But anywho, unfortunately for those girls, my grandmother had not ever received the letter that my Aunt Kay had written her, because my uncle found it and decided, of course, not to send it. So my grandmother was never alerted as to what was going on. If I'm not mistaken, they ended up staying in Wichita the entire school year. Can you imagine the emotional damage they suffered in that house? The psychological toll that it took on each of them? Come to find out, this 19-year-old had some mental issues, and they ended up putting him in a mental institution. What's crazy is my uncle used to make the girls go and visit this man in a mental institution, and they had to hug and kiss this man. Like, gross, right? I must admit, despite all that they went through, my experience with my uncle was entirely different than theirs. I spent countless nights at his house, never had an issue of any sort. Me and my cousins would stay at his house all the time, and he treated us very well. But I really can't lie, I looked at him with the side eye for many years after my mom told me that story. Thankfully to God, when he was on his deathbed, my uncle got the opportunity to ask my mom for forgiveness. I was standing there, and all of a sudden he grabbed my mom's hand and looked at her in her eyes and whispered, "I'm sorry." He never said why he was sorry, but all three of us knew. My mom had forgiven him years before he asked her, but the fact that he apologized was all that she needed, because it validated her memory and those bad experiences that she had. The next memory that I have from my mom was when she was 12 years old. Now, I don't know if my mom and my dad met when she was 12 years old and he was 14, or if they knew each other before. I don't really know, to be honest. But they began dating when she was 12 and he was 14. They found themselves pregnant with my oldest brother at the ages of 13 and 15. My mom made the decision to drop out of school in the 6th grade, and her and my dad decided to get married. According to her, probably one of the worst decisions she's made in her life. Now, mind you, their parents had to sign off for this marriage because they were underage. For the life of me, I can't understand what would make my grandmother and my dad's mom sign off for their 14 and 16-year-old children to get married. I don't understand it. My mom actually held some resentment towards my grandmother for allowing her to get married at that age, because she felt like her mom should have protected her and should have known better than to allow her to do something so foolish. And she should have. Let's be honest. You might ask, well, what did your mom's dad say about the situation? My mom found out that the man her mom was married to for many, many years was not her biological dad. They knew that my grandfather wasn't my oldest two uncles' father, but he fathered the middle 8 children. And we thought the last 3 children. But a couple years before my mom was conceived, my grandfather contracted TB, tuberculosis, and was placed in the hospital in isolation for a few years. My grandmother ended up getting pregnant with my mom's baby brother and then my mom, and they found out that her dad was a man named Philip Johnson. Philip Johnson, I believe, was his name, who I was told had about 30 children down in the Lawton and Temple, Oklahoma area. Anywho, my parents ended up having my brother when they were 14 and 16. They got married and they lived as husband and wife for, I believe, about 8 or so years, somewhere around there. Although it was probably the worst decision, the worst thing that happened to my mom and my dad, their union created me. So good and bad can both be true at the same time, right? From what I was told, there was a lot of physical abuse in the house. But in all honesty, life is hard when you have two adults trying to figure it out. I mean, what would you expect from two children with a baby? Of course, there was abuse. Please don't get it twisted. I'm not here to bash my dad in any kind of way. Between me and my mom, my dad has been bashed quite a bit already, trust me. However, I am here to tell my mom's truth as I remember her telling it to me. She told me that the reason that we never had a toilet plunger in any of my childhood homes was because she would often get beat with one. She told me about the beating she got because my brother was born left-handed and my dad didn't like that. Now, my brother can actually write with both hands because he was forced to do it. A side note, my mom used to have to get my brother, me and my middle brother, to pull her hair just to relieve some of the stress in her head, a headache. That was some of the craziness that ended up being our lives. But again, you think about it, when you have babies trying to raise babies, there would definitely be a lot of things going on that might not make sense to an older, more mature individual. As could be expected, there was also a lot of infidelity in this teenage marriage. I actually had a brother from my dad who was about 2 weeks younger than me. We grew up together, even went to some of the same schools together. We were raised always knowing each other, so it really wasn't that big of a deal. The shocker came when we found out that my middle brother, Charles Jr., was not my dad's biological child. Maybe this is why my mom was so abusive to my middle brother. I don't know. I never understood why she was so mean to him and why she treated him so bad. I won't even lie to you though. My brother was one of the baddest children in school. But there was still something different about the way she handled him. Every time I would go to school after him, because I was 2 years behind him, the school was always shocked to see that we came from the same household because I acted so much differently than he did. So he was a handful. However, he didn't deserve to be treated like that. There was definitely grounds for CPS to come in and take a look-see because, yeah, he got a bad rap. I don't know if it's because he looked so much like his dad. They say that, and, sometimes the parent may feel some kind of way because the illegitimate child looks so much like the other parent or whatever, and then they see their secret, I guess. I don't know if she saw her secret in my brother and that's what made her treat him, but she was very abusive to my middle brother. So I am grateful, however, that before my brother passed away in 2016, he and my mom became really close, which is actually a testament to him because he had a lot of valid reasons to never forgive her. When you see that your mom's mom had children outside her marriage, then you see your mom and dad had children outside of their marriage. How are you supposed to grow up and know what a strong, healthy marriage and relationship looks like? The fact that I was faithfully married for 15 years without ever splitting up or speaking on divorce until we knew it was over is a miracle all in itself. No longer will I carry my mom's pain. No longer will I carry my mom's pain. If you got this far with me, consider subscribing, liking the video, commenting, share my video, please. My point again is to get this out of me, and in the process of getting it out of me so that I can heal, maybe someone else can hear this story and begin their own personal healing journey. That's my hope and my prayer. This will probably only be about 3 parts. That was part 1. The next part should be tomorrow, and it's going into even worse stuff that my mom endured. So come back, listen for my stories on tomorrow. And hopefully, if you are not someone, that you know someone that can benefit from hearing some of the things that we actually had to endure, but we made it out. So stay encouraged, be encouraged as I am encouraged. Don't forget about me. Come back and see me again. Check out some of my other videos. Again, like, comment, share, and please subscribe. Have a good one. Bye.